From the Captain's Quarters podcast is brought to you by Captain Coop's Beard Company. All your beard oils, your beard balms, your beard butters, and now throwing things down in the CBD world with a CBD body butter, a CBD lotion, a CBD tattoo balm, and Tortuga, our personal lubricant. Check everything out at CaptainCoops.com, and don't forget, you get 10% off with the promo code podcast at checkout, CaptainCoops.com. Speaking of CBD, you got to check out my friends over at Apeiron Northfields. They cover all of your CBD needs, including everything from tinctures to body creams, treats for your pets, and their D9 gummies. Legit. It's a must. You go check out their website, ApeirionNorthfields.com. It's the From the Captain's Quarters podcast. I am your host, Cooper, CEO of Captain Coop's Beard Company. Excited to be joined today by Josh Patterson of Off the Grid Surplus, and to hear his story, because I don't want to say every entrepreneur who starts a business everybody goes through trials and tribulations when they're trying to launch their own brand of anything. But yours has so many crazy twists and turns, and I want to get to all of them. But first off, thanks for being a part of the show, man. I appreciate it.
Heck yeah. Love it, man. When I saw you reach out, I was like, oh, this is going to be fun. So I looked into the show a little bit, and so I'm excited. I mean, it's always fun talking business and just connecting with other people in the community. So super stoked to be on.
Yeah, man. I want to talk a bit about you growing up. Have you always been, because I know you have your hands in so many different pots and kettles all over, from King of the Hammer stuff, to the apparel company, to the off-road and overlanding kind of lifestyle. Has this been like something that you were raised in? Did you fall into it? How did you become so off the grid, as the brand so perfectly states?
Sure. I mean, I was raised going to, my birthday's in January. So San Diego in January, you always had like Mickey Thompson's off-road races, yeah, monster trucks, supercross, tractor pulls, all this kind of not desert, but like racing and off-road kind of stuff happening. And that's just what I did for my birthday every single year. It wasn't even like a question. It was like, where are we going this year? It's like, well, what's in town? Supercross, monster trucks, Mickey Thompson's, like, where are we going? And then watching like early desert racing, Ivan Stewart and Walker Evans and these guys. And growing up in Escondido, it was only like an hour and a half to Ocotillo Wells and Glamis. And so we did a ton of that as a kid. I was just always outdoors. Like, I was an ADD kid. My parents were divorced when I was young. And it was basically like, you get home from school and mom's like, get out of here. Like, just go somewhere. Yeah. And so it was skateboarding, BMX, like building dirt jumps, building ramps in the front yard, like whatever I could do to just, I like needed that adrenaline. Yeah. I got into wakeboarding too, really young, like back when it was like Skirfers and, right when it first came out. And that was something that I loved. That was a huge passion of mine, going to the river every weekend with my dad and connecting with him on that, and just being in the sun and, catching air. I love anything where I can do something where I'm getting air or jumping or, adrenaline rush. Like, I was always in. So, and then that morphed to, going to the desert all the time. So it was like river season, right? Summertime, and then desert season in the wintertime. And so that's kind of how we flowed. And then I would be surfing and mountain biking and BMX, everything else in between, skateboarding, snowboarded a lot growing up. I was just always around action sports. Growing up in Southern California, that's just kind of what you do. Like, it's everything. And so got super lucky and was able to get my first gig at 20 years old at Rip Curl. And that's kind of how the whole journey started on the product and design side of things. It just kind of spiraled from there.
How important, I mean, to be involved, like heavily involved in all those things when they really become kind of the fabric of who you are, especially as you grow up, and it becomes a continuation. Like, for you, how important was having a true understanding of adrenaline, doing shit that can get you hurt, like at any moment, but also understanding that is a legit lifestyle that needs to be catered to. And for a long time, not that there always hasn't been brands that catered to that brand of lifestyle, but really put thought and effort and understanding into, no, they need this particular style or this particular cut or this particular look for this purpose? Like, how important was
Yeah.
it for you to be entrenched in that, as from a child up, to really be able to incorporate it into some of the things, especially early on, that you were part of helping design?
Sure. I think the biggest thing where you see kind of fashion and function meet up, is in either like snow sports or, surfing or wakeboarding, things like that, or even gear you make for motocross, because that is where, that technicality, those features you have to have those to be functional, right? And they've grown over the years to really understand, that functionality. A lot of the skaters and stuff, it was more fashion than really function,
right,
for a lot of them. Stretch. I think when people started putting stretch in bottoms, that became a like have to.
right.
And it's interesting because I remember the transition. I was at Quicksilver. I remember the transition from when everyone was wearing baggy jeans to like the slim fits, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that was really part of the fashion. And the crazy thing to it as well was shoes actually drove part of the reason why that fashion changed as well. Because everyone was going away from the big bulky skate shoes,
right,
and going back to the Vans, vulcanized, these slim shoes. You couldn't wear those big baggy pants anymore, right? You had to slim your pants up as well, or they'd just be all over the place. So it's been pretty wild to be kind of behind the scenes for so long, where you can see trends develop, you can see things coming down the pipe, and so it's pretty wild. And then so from there, I was so focused heavy in action sports, and so a lot of the function came in the board shorts and things like that. Is like it was 2-way stretch, and then 4-way stretch, and then I think Hurley had like an 8-way stretch with like, and then it was laser cut seam sealed seams and like no stitching. And well, it's actually good to have some stitching because it's stronger. So it was cool coming up like during that time and seeing that innovation, and then also kind of as I got older, transitioning into the outdoor scene, when I was at Prana as well. And like, even when I was at Quicksilver, they bought Rosignol as a brand. And then a lot of people don't know, but Quicksilver started their own outdoor brand as well, it was Quicksilver Equipped. And so I got to hang out with a lot of really good designers that we had brought in, that would talk about like this innovative stuff that they had worked for, like North Face or some of these other big outdoor brands. And see them really come in and how they dissect products, and that's where I think I really saw the functionality and kind of pairing like, okay, I love the off-road lifestyle. Like that's kind of where once you get older and I can afford, a Jeep now or a truck or whatever, and I can get out in the desert and ride dirt bikes or whatever. I didn't want to have to have like a uniform, right? That was the thing that always drove me nuts, where it's like, oh, I got to go put on my off-road uniform, or now I got my work uniform. Now I got, it's like, I wanted something I could wear every single day that would still function, and do everything I wanted to do in the outdoors, right? So we would go to Ocotillo Wells, we would bring firearms with us, we would bring whatever, and you're digging trucks out, you're climbing into rigs, you're climbing into buggies, and then we go out as the sun goes down, go out to the train tracks and go shoot. And so I wanted pants. I liked the tactical features that had, mag pockets and functional pockets and stuff that, excuse me, you can put all your tools and things in. But I didn't want it to look like a security guard, right? I didn't want to look tactical. I liked the workwear style. I liked like pretty casual style, everyday wearable stuff. And so that was the fun part for me with Off the Grid, was figuring out how to combine those things, right? Of like everyday wearable, but then super functional. And I think that's what a lot of people appreciate about what we do.
And your story, coming up with that, that concept, at what point, because obviously you're gainfully employed, you're a part of, the great organizations that you mentioned, brands, and really it seems like working with people that had a real solid understanding of the clientele that they were serving. Like, for what was it for you? Was it that when you talk about going out and wanting to have the tactical, pockets and stuff, but the look, and was that the beginning of kind of Off the Grid, but knowing that it didn't launch like, I have this idea and boom, look at, now I have my own business. It started off as a side hustle. Like how many years progressed that you from concept, the idea to, okay, maybe there's something here that could lead me into my own world, and obviously a better understanding of the the clients that you're super serving.
Right. So at the time I was working for FMF, right, which is a motocross brand. They were at this company called La Jolla Group, was kind of licensing the brand. And so I got to work with them, and we were launching this moto line with them. And even in that, it's like a lot of times when you're designing for brands, especially on the wholesale side of things, right, where you're designing product to then sell to a store. And so with that, you kind of have to fit your stuff into these buckets, right? Like, oh, well, I know Macy's is going to want a plaid button-up shirt, and Tilly's is going to want, excuse me, a mesh tank top, right? That was kind of a thing back then. And then they're probably going to want a black chino short, right? And it was kind of like you were basically just creating all the same stuff everyone else was. It was just your brand. You like maybe, unique colorways, and then you're labeling, right? And so that always drove me nuts, number one, because there was no innovation. And then number two, we weren't specifically thinking about the consumer and what they needed or wanted, right?
Right.
And so I wanted to create, and I never saw a brand support the off-road community, right? If you go to a Jeep, you go to an Ultra 4 race, right? Or you went to even like a Lowers race back in the day, the Lucas Oil off-road racing series, or there was Core, right? There was all these, or you go to Best in the Desert or More, any of these off-road races, it's Fox, Metal Militia, One Industries back in the day. I worked for them. Those guys are pretty rad. It's a lot of moto brands. There was no apparel brands there. I mean, maybe Big Belly Crew, right? Yeah. Some of these other guys, where it was more t-shirt focused than really like a lifestyle approach to off-roading. And that kind of drove me nuts. And so I was like, you know what? I'll create a brand that supports this group, that designs products specifically for these people, and go from there. And I was driving home from work one day. I lived in Escondido forever, and I always worked in Orange County. So I commuted, 3 hours a day for 14 years or 15 years. And so I had a lot of time to think every day. So I'd be plotting and planning. And one of the days is when the name hit me, driving home, like Off the Grid. And I was like, oh, shoot, I like that. Yeah. It's not so specific to one thing. It really makes me think about all the other things I love to do, like even going snowboarding off the grid, like going on a mountain bike rides off the grid, so it wasn't so like niched up that I couldn't, I didn't want it to be like off-road or overland or, so generic, like so focused on one thing, because I believe it was bigger than that. Because I've worked for massive brands, right? And I've seen kind of how they operated from the inside. And so I was like, oh, I like that name. Went home, researched the trademark. It was available, so I thought. And so went to trademark the brand. And then I got a letter from a judge in North Carolina that, oh, hey, there's somebody that has Off the Social Grid trademark. You can't use it because you're basically only taking one word out of their mark. And I was like, that's really lame. Off the Social Grid, what's that all about? So I reached out to the guy, and we negotiated, and I bought his trademark off him, and then trademarked Off the Grid also. And so that was kind of the beginning. I knew you can't just launch a brand with no followers, with no community, with no anything, just friends, right? And create like pants and jackets and these cut and sew products where you're gonna have to make 800, 1,000 units of something, to be able to supply that. And so I started out just making t-shirts and hats and hanging out and going to freaking chili cook-offs and Super Bowl parties of friends that I just knew, like they were just all off-roaders. And so it's kind of like, hey, here's the brand, here's what I'm doing. And like started to go to like bigger events. Temecula Off-Road Nights was a local one. I mean, growing up in Southern California, thankfully, there's so many events in that location, right, in that area. And so, I remember going to King of Hammers in 2014, I think, or no, it was 2012, and selling T-shirts out of a backpack, just talking to people, and hanging out. And like, that's where I met Justin at Factor 55. I met, a couple other industry guys. God, excuse me. Sorry.
You're good.
And we camped with the Rebel Off-Road guys. So kind of got to meet some of the industry folks there, and just kind of started growing relationship. I think that's what's hard for people a lot of times, is they think like, if you just, and even people will tell me, back in the day, oh, just take this out there, you'll kill it, you'll sell out of everything, right?
Right.
And people will always say that, right? Because they see the idea, they think it's great, but the reality is that doesn't compel people to buy. And so being out there, and you have to be a part of community. Like, there has to be a reason beyond, hey, I've got cool stuff, or hey, I have a cool name, or whatever you have.
Right.
That gets people to connect with your brand, right? They have to start to get to know who you are. Like, what are you about? Well, why is your brand, like, why should I support your brand? Because that's what people are doing. When people buy something from you, they're supporting what you believe in as well, and they're kind of even saying like, hey, I believe in what you believe, and I want to support you. Here's my money. Yeah, they get something in return, but at the same time, like, there's a connection there. And so, I did that for 4 years straight of just social media, like meeting people, retagging, reposting, going to events, like getting to know people, and pounding the pavement and just getting the brand out there, selling stuff. I literally, on my lunch break, have a trunk full of stuff that I needed to ship out, drive to the post office, ship it on my lunch break, and then go back to work. It was like every day, just kind of like, at night I'd get home from work, I'd pack stuff up, I'd be de-weeding vinyl stickers out, and getting those ready to ship. And man, it was just a hustle. So, but I loved it, and I love that community. So that's why I wanted to just keep pushing.
Do you feel like there's over the course of that period of time, because you've worked for major brands before, do you feel like there has been a change in the consumer, where the things that you mentioned about when they buy your product, when they wear your name on their hats or on their shirts or on their pants, has that because they believe in your product, because they believe in what you're doing, because they associate your brand with things that they associate themselves with? Do you think that's changed? It feels like, I don't want to say the 80s or the 90s, or there was decades where it was like you bought the brand because it was the brand. They were the iconic images of whatever it was at the time, whether it was Nike, whether it was, Jinko jeans or Girbaud, whatever it happened to be. Like, right. you bought into it because it was this thing that you wanted to, maybe because, vested interest yourself, but you're like, oh, I need to have this because this is the glowing beacon of what hip is and what in is. Where nowadays it feels like, and maybe social media does tie into that, where the consumer base has more of an option when they go out and they say, I'm going to go and do my diligent research, or see what people that I have interest in are wearing, because if they believe in it, maybe I believe in it. Do you think there was a change in kind of the consumer, maybe, and how social media maybe played into that alteration of their buying habits?
Sure. I mean, and that's where I would say, I got extremely lucky in launching the brand when I did, because previously you would have to go build out a sample line of cut and sew product, right? You'd have to have a sales team, go to a trade show, and get it in front of all these buyers, right?
Right.
And the reality is now you can just put that stuff online. Like, you build your own website, you have your own social media, you do your own promotion, you meet people, right? Then they follow you directly and they can buy from you directly. And so that has really changed things a lot. One, it's flooded the marketplace with just a lot of stuff, which is good and bad. It's great because you have options, but at the same time, it's like, it's funny when I tell people I own a clothing brand, it's like they almost pat you on the head and go, oh, good for you, sport,
Right. When you grow up and get a real job, when does that happen?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, well, I've been doing this for 20 years now, and it's, I try and create product that I think people will really like and enjoy, and that it serves them. And so the great thing is people have options, right? And that they don't have to go to the local big box store. They don't have to go, to these places to buy their gear anymore. But at the same time, you need to give them an experience, right? Like, buying something, there has to be experience regardless. And I think that's the great thing nowadays too, is like, there's less influence on the malls, right? Where it's a giant white box full of racks of crap.
Yeah.
Where now it's like, man, companies, you grow yourself direct consumer online, and then you open a few stores, right? I was so stoked to be able to open our store in Escondido, because it gives you a place to showcase how you want your brand to be represented, like what it truly means to you in a physical space, right? And so that's the great thing about social media and influencers as well, right? That can be a dirty word, but at the same time, like, you're aligning yourself with people that have influence in the community to help promote your brand, and you help promote them as people. And so I look at them as athletes, right?
Yeah.
In action sports, it's like, you would go get the best athlete, like Rip Curl. Okay, we've got, Dane Reynolds, or we want to go after Mick Fanning, right? Or whoever it is, right? Even smaller guys, like, you want people to have influence in their community, because you're creating a vibe around that family that you now have built of athletes, that help push you out into culture more than you could yourself, right?
Right.
And so that's how I view we call them instigators. We don't call them influencers. And, it really is like a family. There's so many people that hit us up all the time and are just like, hey, how can I get some gear? And it's like, well, the problem is I don't know you, right? And the reality is I work with people that I know or come to get to know, or that I know somebody knows them, because you're going to be representing me and my brand, that feeds, 3 families. And I don't just give stuff away to anybody who asks for it. Like, even if you've got a rad build, like, that's great. You might be a kind of a total jackwagon in your community, and I don't want that to be represented with my company. And so I think a lot of people don't realize kind of the importance of community, the importance of how you portray yourself, and how you are within a group of people online, and even like at a lot of shows, right? And so we work with people that we get to know and that we become friends with and that we align with, in life. And that's just the reality. And that's the great part about it is, man, I've been so blessed and lucky to meet some of the greatest people in the community, period. Like, Justin at Factory 55, one of the first people I got to meet, one of the best dudes, period, like, that I've ever met. Marco Hernandez, Overland X, is one of the nicest guys you will ever meet. And so Yeti and YOLO, I met those two before they even knew each other. Nice. Which is wild. Like, we all had our little Instagram pages, and like, I think we're all around like 300 to 1,000 followers at the time we met. And it's just been crazy to watch them grow and like, be together, and it's fun. It's really fun. So, and that's what creates, you get introduced to someone else, and, they talk about the brand of somebody, so that they hit you up like, hey, Yeti and Yellow reached out to me. They said, I really love your stuff. I got to see him wearing it. Like, I'd love to, check it out. Cool. Like, send me, what you're all about, give me, let's communicate for a little while first before, let's start this relationship slow and go from there.
I love the Instigator. I think that because of the industry that you're in, that is your lifestyle, it's almost, I want to say the opposite of influencer, but I think the term influencer, you think of like, here's a pretty girl and she just gets up and looks this way and people send her stuff, but you talk about Yeti and YOLO, you talk about Baby Yoda, the people that you have involved. I mean, the lifestyle that you lead, that I lead, that they lead, isn't what society would consider. That's what people go and do when they want to have a good time. They want to lose cell phone reception. Right. They want to sleep in a tent under the stars. I mean, we have friends of ours that are like, we went on this. We do this thing called Epic Willie's Adventure. So we take 1940s to 60s Willie's Jeeps, and we just go off grid basically for 2 weeks. And we were preparing to go onto the Oregon Trail back in August. And a friend of ours was over for dinner. It was right before my birthday, and they're like, "Why would you do that? Like, why, like voluntarily, why would you go into that? I'm like, until you're in a moment, and I think I had a couple of those moments on this last trip, sleeping under the stars under Mount Hood, and you're like, this is why.
Yeah,
so
100%.
The instigator part of it is, yes, they have influence because whether they're following, but you are following people who live this lifestyle that doesn't really live inside the confines or the chalk outline of what life is supposed to be. It's supposed to be easy and convenient, and it's you always have full bars and 5G. But the people that you're talking about, your instigators, they're out doing crazy wild things and just living life to what I would call living at the fullest, and most of the time, to coin a phrase, living it off the grid. So I love the instigator versus influencer vernacular, because I think it's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. They're, and a lot of them instigate a lot of shenanigans when we're around. So, I mean, that's the fun part is, that's why I love going to events. And I mean, it was rough last year not being able to go to events. And this year has been awesome because it's like seeing all your old friends again that, you rally up at these different events. But yeah, I remember when Yeti and YOLO, they lived off the grid in their Jeeps. I mean, I was like, man, you guys are nuts. Like, I love doing this, like on the weekends and going out and like going on a real adventure, but you're living adventure, and like, good on you. So that was rad to see them do that for a while. But I know Yeti wanted to get his hand back around a hammer and start building stuff again. So it's been cool seeing their transition.
Anytime I'm scrolling through Instagram and I see like either a flamethrower or something being beaten, I'm like, that's probably Yeti. Giant flamethrowers and stuff. Now, but when you to jump back into kind of the origin story of you starting off the grid, there was a moment, and again, I talked about obstacles and we kind of opened. The things that you had to do, pounding the pavement, selling things out of the trunk of your car, driving to the post office on your lunch break to ship all those things out. When they start to recognize you, like, oh, and you kind of toss your stuff up on the counter. But
yeah,
there was a point, and I don't know the exact details of it, but where there was some cash was had in hand, and you were ready to make a big step in the direction of making this your primary gig, and the magic internet fairies dipped in and took that money. What is the story about the was it like 10 grand or something that was magically deliciously vanished?
Yeah, so I finally got to the point. I was working for a company at the time, and we did a lot of licensing where we would have your brand and we would create all your products for you and sell it for you, and then you would just pay a licensing fee or whatever, right? So I worked with a bunch of brands at the time, and I had kind of talked to my boss about off the grid. In fact, even trying to talk them into possibly partnering with me on it. And that didn't work out, but my boss really liked me. And so she was like, hey, why don't you reach out to some of the factories and see if you can get some samples made? And I was like, dude, that would be amazing. So started down that process, got samples made. And from then I was like, you know what, I'm going to do an Indiegogo campaign, do crowdfunding, see if we can, if the community wants this, then they'll back it.
Right.
And so did that, still didn't know squat about, marketing, paid ads, any of that stuff. And so I did the Indiegogo campaign all on my own, was doing tried to do boosted posts, I guess, which wasn't even really working very well. And we did okay. We raised like 14 grand, which was enough to get production started. So at the time, especially being a small new brand, your factories give you terms of like, hey, you have to give us 30% up front, and then when it hits the docks, before we even send it to you, you got to pay us the final 70%. And so you're like, okay, whew. So that Indiegogo campaign luckily raised enough for the initial, for then some, the initial buy, like deposit down, and then some of the final cost too. And so we started production. And then at the end of production, right, and we get the delivery, we had a payment we had to make of around 10 grand. And I've been kind of messaging back and forth with the factory on when stuff was coming in and when I could get it, and I didn't have the money. And so I had asked my mom, like, hey, can I take a loan from you and borrow this money? I need this left. And she believed in me at the time and still does. But she really believed in the idea and the brand. And so she loaned me the money. And I was still working for another brand at the time, and I had to fly out to Colorado for over outdoor retailer. And so I was going to wire the money as soon as I got there so that they could release the goods. And I had been emailing back and forth with them on the financial stuff, and I got this email of like new new banking details, and I was like, oh, okay, that's weird, but whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I wired the money to that new banking details, and go about my day. I have to work. I'm at this trade show, and I fly back that night. I'm with my two business partners at the time, and call the factory. One of them wasn't my business partner yet, but called the factory, and I was like, hey, just want to make sure you got the wire. Like, you're gonna release the goods, blah blah blah. And they're like, we didn't receive any money. And I was like, oh, what? I was like, what do you mean? Like, you didn't receive any money? And then first I thought, like, did they steal the money? And then I was like, well, here's the email, here's the banking details. They're like, that wasn't from us. And I went and I looked, and if you looked at each of the email names, it was all the exact same email addresses. There was just an underscore in each one that they had added and copied into that email thread and started messaging me. And so that money was gone. When you do international wire, you have like an hour, I think. And when you're dealing with overseas, right, they're not even there.
Right.
And so thankfully at the time, my buddy, Bobby, who was starting to run ads for us and was seeing this great response, was like, you know what, I don't even know why I'm doing this, but I'll loan you the money. He loaned me the money, which I paid him back in, like, I think with all the sales we did, I paid him back in a couple of weeks.
Wow.
Which was good. But here's the funny story, right? So that happened. We got everything in. Bobby had loaned me the money. I still owe my mom $10,000 today. I got to pay her back still. Sorry, Mom.
Sorry, Mom.
It's coming.
Check's in the mail.
And so, yeah, she's been super understanding. So anyway, I have I'm still dealing with the same factory. I still do a lot of products with them. And just recently, I had some money I needed to wire to them, and I get this email that's like, oh, hey, just wanted to confirm these new banking details, blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking, and I'm like, Bank of Dubai, like, get the hell out of here. I was laughing. I screenshotted it, and I sent it back to our factory. Because now I always confirm. It's like, right. I get an email on bank details. I go on WhatsApp, and I was like, hey, man, like, got an email from you, I think. Like, is this correct? Like, I want to confirm this over the phone, make sure we're good. And so I was laughing. I played with them actually for a little bit. I was like, oh, really? I'm going to go reach out to Donnie and just confirm these details with him and see what he says. And they're like, oh, no, he said it was totally fine. Anyway.
Yeah, we know Donnie. We go way back.
It's crazy that there's, 3 years later, this still pulling the same scam, which I guess happens quite a bit, actually. And so, yeah, it was wild, man. That was devastating. One, I borrowed money from my mom that I now couldn't pay back. I had to find more money to pay for this thing, to get product that I'd already sold, right, through Indiegogo.
Right.
And so, that was one of the first times where I was like, oh, this ain't going to work. But we made it happen and, kept rolling. And honestly, there's been countless times that's, not that, but, other things will happen, production issues.
Yeah.
Our third version of the pants, we were working with a new tech designer, and one of our Harley reps had told us, like, hey, it's so funny when I think people think we were such this big company.
Right.
I'm going to post this photo of the three of us that work for Off the Grid full time and send it out for Christmas to be like, hey, everybody, Merry Christmas or Happy New Year from the Off the Grid team. And
here's all of us.
Right. We have contractors and stuff like that as well, but dude, we are a very small, lean and mean team. A very small business still. And I'm just super grateful for them. They're amazing. Lauren and Ali now, who was from Casey Highlights, just joined the team recently. So, but one of our reps was like, hey, there's kind of like a gapping issue in the back, whatever. So we worked, with this tech designer to fix that issue. And the way she did it wasn't the correct way. And so what happened was it made the waist an inch bigger on every single one. And so we do pre-order, right? So everything came in 1 to 2 sizes too big. And so we had shipped everything. And all these people that pre-ordered were like, now we're getting all these returns. And we're like, what are we going to do? Like, is this it? Like, we had been waiting 9 months for this inventory to come in because we'd sold out of the second version so fast. And like, during that 9 months, I got my car repossessed. Like, we had no product to sell. So it was like, we're trying to slang tees, hats, and shirts. I just quit my job, and the factory's like, dude, we can't get you new stuff till July. And I was like, what? July? It's I think it was November at the time. I was like, we're sold out. Like, we don't have any product to sell. That's no revenue. That's no nothing. Right. And they're like, yeah, man, I don't know what to tell you. I'm like, buckle up. So, dude, that first year was pretty wild. And so my poor wife, yeah, I'm sitting there one night and my wife's like, there's a truck with like a tow thing towing your car. And I was like, sweet. So
I guess that saves on gas money. I guess they just
seriously. Drive it for you. Good thing I work from home.
Just walk to my office. No, I think all those the tribulations and trials that you have to go through in a startup, in a business, when again you have a team that's 3 people deep. There's so many avenues. There's so many exit ramps for you during that. The
right.
10 grand, the pants order, and I'm sure there's been a multitude of other things that come up, and they're like, well, I guess
sorry.
I hear the food service industry is hiring. Like, there's
right.
there's moments that it's so the person who is like, it sounds really cool to have your own apparel company. It sounds really cool to have your own business. Like, I want to be my own boss. I'm going to do cool stuff, and I know what fashion I know, but there are so many opportunities when shit hits the fan, and you're like, throw the papers in the air. All right, well, I guess that was a fun adventure. But I think what separates brands like yours from others that are out there is when that stuff happens, you find a way, and it's not great. It's not glamorous. It's not glorious. It's not fun. As you watch your vehicle go down the road, like, but to right. stick with it because you believe in it, because, your team believes in it, and because you have obviously a client base that is like, they will stick with you. They're like, dude, we're on your team here. We'll get through this, but that's like the next level stuff. That's what, living life on your own terms really is about, is you go,
right.
Didn't expect that. Would have been nice if that didn't happen, but I believe in what I'm doing. So I'm going to continue down this path, that come hell or high water, however right. rough the seas may be.
Yep. Perseverance, man. Mm-hmm. Like, that's, small business has, phases, right? You have startup, then you have perseverance, then you have profitability, then you have scalability, mm-hmm. and then you have like basically exit at that point. But perseverance phase, which we're still in, as a company, is exactly that. Like, you're persevering, you're overcoming, you're figuring out cash flow, you're, bootstrapping loans to get, especially we're bootstrapped as it comes, for a small business, like no major outside investment. We've been tagging things together, and luckily there's great like merchant loans we've been able to get out there now to keep, help fund the growth of the business. But man, yeah, it's wild. It's a wild ride. And we have great coaches. We have business coaches that we work with that are, massively helpful. That, there's just a lot of things like having daily disciplines, right? Like meditating, journaling. There's so many days that you literally get up and you're just like, right? Like one of those days happens and the next day you're like, I don't know how I'm going to go sit in front of my computer today.
Right.
Like, and be able to focus, without my gears grinding to a halt, like trying to figure this problem out. But then you pick up the phone, you call hey man, like, I'm dealing with this issue. Oh, I had something similar like that happen. Why don't you try this, or this, or have you thought about this, right? They give you the space to to breathe and kind of come up with ideas to keep pushing forward. Because I mean, there's definitely days where you're just like, I don't know what to do.
Right.
Like, I don't know what to do today. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. And then, man, you do, you know, and that's what, like you said, like living life on your own terms, like that's what you have to do. Like, there's no security blanket. There's no net to fall into. Like, it's all or nothing. Like, you just got to keep going.
And I think it's so important to have those people, especially when when you invest, whether that's in a business coach or whether that's in a life coach, or you're part of a coaching group, however that works out. Meditation is, I think is a key thing too. A lot of people, you start throwing the word meditation around, they're like, oh yeah, hippie, yeah, all right, namaste. Yeah. You're like,
right.
It's about more than that, especially when
right.
you understand having such a small team. That means that you have less people to hold all the bandwidth in. There's so many different things, from the marketing to the product to customer service, sales, events, everything that you guys are a part of. But to have that moment in meditation where you're like, there is a sense of normalcy, and I can kind of compartmentalize everything. But having people that you can go, this is happening, and you feel like maybe at the moment there's no way that somebody has had their money in a wire transfer confiscated by an underscore in the email address, and somebody goes, yeah, that's happened, and you just kind of got to either bail or you suck up and get through it. So it's so important, I think, to have your roots grounded in connecting with people around you, with meditation. And how does routine factor into your day? Do you have kind of a, your schedule looks like, okay, I know that in the morning I'm going to get up and do this, and I have these things to do. Are you pretty strict, stick to the schedule kind of guy? Ish? Kinda?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
So there is a set amount of things that I have to do every day. Mm-hmm. This year, my word for the year in 2022 is discipline. So like, yes, I get through those things every day, but they're not as scheduled routine as I would like. And so for next year, that's my focus, is getting them in a very tight routine. Yeah. But yeah, it's there's 4 core things, right? It's body, being, balance, and business. So body is exercise and drink a green juice. Being is meditate and journal. Balance is wife and kids, right? So sending them notes, communicating with them every day, like giving them gratitude, like, hey, thank you, connecting. And business is learn something new every day, and then you got to declare, one of those things, right? Or even creating, there's other things called like RGAs, revenue generating activities. Like, what are 3 RGAs today that I could do? And so those are like must do's every day. And when you get them done, so with our group, they're like, those should be done before you start your day, like period. Like, take 2 hours in your morning, figure it out, get the frick up early, David Goggins, like, stop being such a punk and get up and get to work.
So look at just go wake up and look at Jocko's watch and be like, oh, I sucked. I didn't wake up till 5 today. I suck at life.
Right. And so being a creative, though, I mean, it's really difficult for me, I'll be honest. And so that's one of the things that I strive, to get better at. The other thing is time blocking. So like, it's basically creating a budget in your weekly calendar for all your time. So even blocking out like, hey, I'm going to set aside like 2 hours for meetings on Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon for random people. Like, if somebody hits me up on an email or call and like, hey, can we have a meeting? It's like, yes, I have time between Tuesday, this time to this time, or Thursday, this time to this time, right? You can kind of bucket them. Yep. You don't even have to think about it. And then you have your other meetings in there. And then I create 2 different chunks. So every morning I have to work on our cash flow. Like, finances are really tight with us. So like, every morning I get up, I download our bank statement, I go into our cash flow document, and I input all the data. How much did we spend yesterday? How much came in yesterday? How much is going out this week? Where are we at? Are we jacked next week? Like, am I gonna have to push a bill out for a week? Like, how's that gonna work? And then I do GSDs, or get stuff done, to put it politely.
I got you.
Get stuff done, and then I'll have like notes within there of like, I have my checklist of like, all right, here's everything you need to get done. Like focus on the important ones, the urgent and important, and go from there. And then I have creative time. So, and I block those in, right? Like creative time is, you know, free thinking. It's maybe designing something. Maybe it's me looking through blogs, you know, maybe I go back and meditate again because I got so jacked up in, you know, trying to deal with cash flow and getting everything done in the morning. I got to get my headspace back together. So those things are really, and scheduling in your family time, right? Like that's super important. And again, something I'm weak at and need to grow in, but that's another massive thing, like making sure your family time is scheduled in, and you know, when your kids have sports, and it's not just like, well, there are games at 5, it's, hey, at 4:30 I'm leaving the house, you know, so I got to schedule that time in so that I don't overflow into that. And so, I mean, that's the big thing for me is that time blocking and like really budgeting my time during the week to make sure like I'm effective and getting as much done as I possibly can.
What advice do you give people that ask you, you know, I think the world is full of a lot of creative people, and I think social media has highlighted a lot of those. It's given a lot of people opportunity to be able to express that in that context. But someone says, you know, I have this idea and I'm thinking about starting a business, and they come to you, Josh, and they're like, give me like one good piece of advice for somebody who's like, I have an idea, you know, how do they take that idea from concept or advice and or warnings? Like, you know, check the email address from where things get sent. But what do you tell people when they ask you, like, you know, where to start, where to begin, and just pieces of advice that you hand off? Because like we've talked about, it's not idea and look, now I have my mansion and life is good.
I'm Scrooge McDuckin. Yeah.
These are my pennies now.
Yeah. I mean, for one thing I tell people is how important is this to you? Like this idea, is this like a fun thing, or is this like, this can change my life thing? Because then that's going to separate the two, right? Because it's like, if this is just like a fun novelty idea that you know, so many people come up with like, oh, I had this idea for a t-shirt. It's like, have you been to Spencer's Gifts or freaking, you know, any of these other places? Like a lot of people have a lot of ideas for t-shirts. But you know, it's kind of like, how hard are you willing to work to make this happen? Period. Like, and do you have the time to do it? And do you have the knowledge to do it? Basically, you know, a lot of people want to start. I mean, I had a guy at a show just recently, like, oh yeah, I have this idea for apparel brand. And I was like, okay, what is it? And it was a name. And I was like, well, what are you going to make? Well, you know, clothes. And I was like, well, like what kind? You know, oh, I don't know. I'll just find some and like, we'll just put the brand on it, you know? And I think, I mean, I hate to say it, but I think a lot of people think that way, where it's just like, I just have a great name. I'll just put the brand on whatever. Like, doesn't really matter. I can find some semi-cool stuff and I'll just sell it. And it's just like, man, there's so much good clothing, if we're being specific. But I think in a lot of arenas, because there is a lot of creative people, really good people, like good people that are really good designers, really, you know, that have honed their craft, that have worked for other brands, you know. And that's what I would, if you've never done the thing that you're talking about doing, go find a company that already does it and go intern or go work there. Because if you've never done that before, you have no idea the pitfalls that are about to attack you, you know, because you don't understand the process from going to idea to success. Right. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to have, like, to be humble about that and know, like, oh man, like, if this is a dream of mine and I want it to last, I need to understand this better, right? Who's my competition? Who am I going after? Is there a niche I'm in? Like, who's going to make this for me?
Right.
How am I going to market it? What does that look like? What's my budget? How much is it going to cost for my first run of product? How long do I have to sell this before I go broke? Am I putting it on a credit card? You know, do I got a rich uncle that's going to give me some cash?
Right.
Like, what does that look like? And then the next thing I tell people to focus on is focus on your margins and your profitability. Because that's one of the things that we definitely are finding out later now. Like, we really need to hone in on our budgeting and making sure that we're budget our money well, that we have a clear understanding of how much we're buying versus how much we're selling in a season. Like, you know, we've overbought a few times, and that's hamstrung us a little bit because you're still paying on product that's sitting in a warehouse somewhere that you're paying rent for that, and it's just sitting around. And so then you're, you know, off pricing it or selling it, and that hurts. You know, you're not making as much money as you could off that product, and you know, it can start to bog down on you. And so you got to give people the reality of, like, really, how much do you think you can sell?
Right.
You know, and focus on that number, and then go hammer that. Like, that's your goal. Put it up on the wall. Yeah. Like, I'm going to sell this many of this in this many, right? When you create a goal, you have to have, it has to be measurable, attainable, and, you know, there has to be a timeline attached to it.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah.
Being involved, you know, if you can find a business that is working in what your desire is to have your own of, obviously with your own twist on it, but understanding, and I'm sure you went through this too, like, it's not just the price of something. Like, it's the price of something. It's the price of the packaging. It's the price of the label. It's the price of the shipping. It's the price of the warehouse.
Right.
I went through that experience when we launched the beard stuff. I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, it's like $4 for a thing, and then I'm like, oh, then it's $1.29 for the jar, and then it's and the labels are. I'm like, oh, profit margin. Now I you really have to. And I'm guessing you probably went through a lot of. You had some experience in the industry, so you had an understanding of it. But when you're looking at it and it's your money that is invested, you're like, oh yeah,
right.
Maybe we do have to not just go that label company, that packaging. You have to do some, you know, become a diligent researcher in what's out there and what's available to it. But we kind of talked about how 2021 was the kind of return of getting to events. I saw you guys in passing out at SEMA this year, which was so nice to see human beings back and interacting, especially in that environment, because the enthusiasm in the building, even though it was a little more spread out because of the new hall out there, but 2021 was the return of events and getting out and getting in front of people. What are you most anticipating and looking forward to in 2022 as far as the industry goes, as far as your brand goes? You know, any big plans for the new year to go next level on stuff?
Yeah. So for 2022, we have, well, even just for spring, we have a few new products launching, which I'm really excited about. So our woven shirts have now become kind of a staple for people. And then this is kind of what happens because we have a very unique pocketing system and kind of features and what we do, and we keep them consistent, right? Yeah. So like, we find something that works, we make sure we consistently use it, because people are habitual, right? Where you keep things, where you have stuff. And so new woven shirt, a plaid, lightweight, like, travel shirt that I think is going to be super rad. Our Thunderbolt relaunch, which that was a really popular shirt that we kind of bought sizing. We bought the sizing a little wrong in it, so we had a bunch of these random sizes left over, and so we were able to refine that in great new color palettes. A new color in the Trailblazer pant, which I'm excited about. A new hybrid short, so the new over and out short, I'm really stoked on. Cool fabric, you know, still has the mag pockets, right? Like, I'm not going to make anything that doesn't have mag pockets ever again. And so stoked on the new product line. Really excited to have Ali on the team that came from Casey Highlights. And I mean, he used to work for 511 Tactical as well. And so his knowledge of marketing, this kind of whole approach, this kind of global approach to marketing is pretty amazing. So just seeing him unleashed with the brand and creating community with the influencers we have, and then the new ones that we're looking to, you know, kind of come to an agreement on or hang out with this year and get to know them. That one's going to be great. Racing King of Hammers is going to be pretty wild. So looking forward to that. I mean, I'm not where I want to be prep wise or even personally for that. It's really kind of starting to bear down on me right now. But I think that'll be awesome, you know, to get that started and see where we go with that. We've got some other big news. It's kind of behind the scenes, which kind of waiting to come to fruition. my goal hopefully is to hire more people this year. So, you know, we have been a really, really lean team. And so that's kind of one of my focuses going into next year is identifying those key hires to bring on and help kind of carry the load of the brand so that we can do things really well with excellence. You know, we've kind of had to not cut corners, but not do it at the level that I would like. And even the team, I think the team would like to do things. They'd like to be able to spend a little bit more time on certain parts of the process. So I'm looking forward to that. I think we're gonna have a big fall line this year as well. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, I changed up our buying cadence a little bit, kind of spread things out and did more deliveries this year, which I'm looking forward to. So yeah, there's a lot. You know, there's a lot going on. My business partner is, you know, he exited the brand just recently to go back to kind of start a new endeavor for himself. And so that kind of freed me up to take over the reins again and really kind of push the vision of what I see Off the Grid being going forward. So I'm really fired up on. I've always been there, you know, casting the vision and dealing with the product and stuff, right. But I think having the ability from the top to lead and cast vision and just really spend the time to say, this is where Off the Grid is, but this is where I see us going in the next 5 to 10 years, and really rallying the team around that idea and getting them excited about what we're doing, which they absolutely are. It's been pretty fun to see. So yeah, that's kind of where things are at right now. That's what I'm looking forward to. Again, discipline, right? So, you know, disciplining myself next year to kind of routine things a little bit more and kind of focus but with fun. I feel like I'm a pretty fun guy being a creative as well. Like, I mean, all the brands I've worked for, we either had skate parks or we would surf at lunch or whatever. So that's always been kind of my mentality. Just keep it light, have fun. Like, yes, what we're doing it's a business and there are serious aspects to it, but the reality is we do this because we love it and it should be fun. So at the end of the day, if we're not having fun, it doesn't make sense.
Absolutely, man. Well, Josh, hey, thank you for the time, man. I appreciate hearing the stories and your perspective on things and the journey. And I think there's so many great messages in the last hour that we talked about. So those who are listening, who have ideas or have concepts or are in the middle of it, and all of a sudden you see that exit ramp. Josh has experienced many of them and was able to keep it on the rails, and obviously have a lot of forward momentum going into the next year. But I look forward to. I have a feeling that at some point in 2022 we're going to cross paths, whether it's one of the many shows we'll be at or SEMA next year. But and my buddy races King of the Hammers too, so maybe there's one of those events that will end up. Patrick Patterson is my bearded brethren. Who races.
Awesome.
So
yeah.
We'll be out, man. Congratulations. OffTheGridSurplus.com is the website and also on the social media. So make sure you guys check them out and follow them. And Josh, Happy New Year. And we'll definitely be in touch, my friend. Take care of yourself and my best to the family.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, and Happy New Year to you too, man. Take it easy.
Awesome. Thank you so much for checking out episode number 85 from the Captain's Quarters podcast. Remember to subscribe on whichever podcast platform you're listening. Leave us a review, and the biggest thing you can do to help the show grow is to share it with your family and friends, especially if you took any nuggets of information out of here and you're going to use them to better your life. That is what it's all about. Spreading the word, which you can do. Share it on your social medias. That would be huge. Thanks.